My name is Natalie Brooks, and I am 29 years old. Until about 3 months ago, I believed my life was steady in that quiet, unremarkable way people often mistake for something permanent. I was not chasing chaos, nor was I restless or searching for a way out. I truly thought I was already living inside the future I had chosen. I worked as a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was nothing flashy, just stable, the kind of job that pays well enough to build a life you never have to justify. I drove a reliable car, rented a clean 2-bedroom apartment downtown, and handled my responsibilities carefully. My bills were always paid on time. I made plans. I saved consistently. And I loved a man I believed was building something alongside me. His name was Daniel. We had been together for 2.5 years. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue in the spring. One of those afternoons that stretches longer than expected, where conversations blend into laughter and people linger instead of leaving. Daniel carried himself with an easy confidence, charismatic without being loud, and ambitious in the way some men describe dreams more vividly than the steps required to reach them. He often talked about starting his own consulting business, about independence, about not wanting to be tied to a boss forever. I admired that part of him. About 6 months into our relationship, his lease ended while mine still had time left. He explained that moving in together simply made sense, framing it as something temporary until he got back on his feet. That short period slowly turned into 2 full years. His business never truly got off the ground. There were always explanations, constant shifting reasons. The market was unstable, the tools were not good enough, the timing was wrong, or the connections were missing. First, I did not mind helping. I took care of rent, utilities, groceries, his phone bill, his car insurance, and sometimes even his credit card when things became tight. He contributed when he could, small amounts here and there. Enough to show effort, but never enough to make a real difference. I convinced myself this was what partnership looked like. I told myself that support meant love, and that patience would eventually pay off. That is what you believe when you truly have faith in someone. The dinner happened on a Saturday in late September. Daniel's family lived about 40 minutes away in Huntersville. His parents, his older sister Claire, and her husband Ethan. They had invited us over for what they described as a family celebration. His father had just retired after decades at the county clerk's office. Looking back, the signs were there, though I failed to recognize them. During the drive, Daniel barely spoke. He remained focused on his phone, his thumbs moving quickly while a faint smile appeared every few seconds. When I asked if everything was okay, he responded without looking up, saying it was fine, though it clearly did not feel that way. When we arrived at the house, he walked in ahead of me without holding the door or waiting. I was left behind, juggling a bottle of wine and a card as the door nearly closed behind him. It seemed small, but small moments tend to accumulate. Dinner itself was polite, yet tense in a way no one openly acknowledged. The table was beautifully arranged, with cloth napkins and proper dishes. His mother had clearly put in a great deal of effort. The food was warm and generous, the kind that takes hours to prepare. Conversation drifted awkwardly. His mother asked me about work and my current projects, and I answered carefully, doing my best to remain present. Daniel barely participated. He checked his phone repeatedly until his mother gently asked him to put it away. Partway through the meal, his father raised a glass and expressed gratitude for family and for being together. Everyone followed, lightly tapping their glasses. I reached toward Daniel's, but he pulled his away, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. Claire saw it. I could tell from her expression. Then his mother smiled at us and in a light tone, asked if we had any big plans coming up. It was the kind of question parents ask when they are quietly hoping for news of an engagement. I started to respond, intending to deflect with humor, but before I could finish, Daniel set his fork down with a firm, deliberate motion and stated clearly that we were no longer together. The room fell silent. I stared at him, my mind struggling to catch up with what I had just heard, and asked in a quiet, almost unsteady voice what he meant. He turned toward me with an expression I did not recognize, cold, distant, almost as if it had been practiced. He explained that we had ended things weeks earlier and added that I had refused to accept it. My chest tightened as I looked around the table, searching for confusion or disbelief, hoping someone might laugh or question him, but no one did. In that moment, I understood that something was wrong in a way I had never anticipated. Something serious was unfolding, something I had not prepared for, something I had not seen coming, and it was only the beginning. For several long seconds after he spoke, no one moved or reacted. No one laughed, no one questioned him, and no one mirrored the confusion I felt tearing through me. The silence pressed in from every direction, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the kitchen. I could hear my own breathing, uneven and shallow, as if I had just climbed a long flight of stairs. When I finally spoke his name, my voice remained low, controlled only by instinct, as I asked what exactly he was talking about. He responded immediately, without hesitation, which was the part that unsettled me the most. He repeated that we had ended the relationship, speaking more loudly this time and angling himself slightly so his family could clearly see his expression. I shook my head slowly, trying to steady myself, and explained that while we had argued about money and his spending, we had not broken up. We were still living together, and I had driven him there that same evening. Instead of reacting with doubt, he exhaled as if I had confirmed his point. He gestured toward me and calmly described my behavior as someone who rewrites reality, someone who acts as though nothing has changed even when everything has been made clear. My stomach dropped. His mother lifted her hand to her chest, visibly shaken. His father leaned back, studying me with narrowed eyes as if I were suddenly unfamiliar, even threatening. Claire looked between us, her expression uncertain and conflicted, while Ethan shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. I spoke again, louder this time, my heart pounding, insisting that what he was saying was not true. I reminded him that we had shared the same bed just 4 nights earlier, and that I had made him breakfast the previous Sunday, pancakes, exactly the way he had asked for them. He cut me off sharply, dismissing those details as meaningless. He claimed that I treated gestures as if they created obligation, as though doing things for him meant he owed me a relationship. Heat rushed to my face as I responded, telling him that my support came from believing we were still together, from trusting what he had said about building something shared between us. His mother rose slightly from her chair, her voice trembling as she asked him directly whether he had truly tried to end the relationship. He nodded immediately, without pause, and stated that he had made several attempts and that he had tried to approach it carefully. I told them that I had not wanted to humiliate her, yet she refused to accept reality. He went on to explain that she kept appearing, behaving as though nothing had changed between us. I stared at him, my vision blurring at the edges as I tried to steady myself. This was not confusion, and it was not some simple misunderstanding. It felt deliberate, like a carefully staged performance. I looked around the table again, this time with growing desperation, hoping someone would notice the inconsistencies. I wanted someone to remember the holidays we had shared, the birthdays, the trips, the way Daniel had relied on me both financially and emotionally. But instead I saw something else entirely. Faces adjusting, reshaping their understanding of events in real time. His father's jaw tightened slightly before he addressed me, speaking slowly and with measured care as he asked whether what Daniel said was true. The question already carried the weight of a conclusion. I answered no, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay composed, insisting that the situation was absurd and that we had not ended the relationship. I asked them, trying to make sense of it aloud, why I was still paying the rent if we were no longer together, why he remained on my insurance, why we were still sharing a life in every practical way. Before I could continue, Daniel interrupted again, his voice edged with a kind of practiced frustration. He claimed that the reason he was still there was because I had not allowed him to leave. He described how, according to him, every attempt he made to walk away was met with tears, promises of change, or reminders of everything I had done for him. He called it manipulation. The word struck hard. His mother reacted with a quiet gasp. Claire turned her gaze away. Ethan focused on his plate. I could feel how their perception of me was shifting, shrinking me into something unrecognizable. I tried to respond, to explain, but he spoke over me once more. He said that he had not wanted to bring this up in front of everyone, presenting himself as someone forced into the situation by my actions, as though he had no other choice but to reveal everything. At that point, I understood something clearly. No matter what I said, it would not sound convincing. Every attempt to defend myself only seemed to reinforce the version of me He was presenting desperate, unstable, unreasonable. My hands began to shake as I slowly pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor and drawing everyone's attention. I forced my voice to steady and said that I did not understand what this situation had become, but I would not remain there while false accusations were being made about me. Daniel seemed ready to continue, perhaps to push things even further, but I did not wait. I stated that I was leaving. His mother began to speak, his father shifted forward, and Claire looked as though she might call out to me, but I gave none of them the opportunity. I walked out of the dining room and through the living room, where framed family photographs lined the walls. Images of holidays, beach trips, and smiling faces that now felt like silent witnesses to something deeply distorted. Outside, the cool night air hit me sharply. My lungs burned as though I had been holding my breath for hours. My hands shook so badly that unlocking my car became difficult. Once inside, I sat in silence with the engine off, gripping the steering wheel and staring ahead. My chest ached, my ears rang, and my phone vibrated with a message from Claire asking what had just happened. I did not respond. I started the car and drove. The 40-minute drive back felt endless. Streetlights stretched into blurred streaks of yellow and white as my mind replayed the dinner over and over. Every word, every glance, every accusation. I searched for anything I might have missed, any conversation I might have overlooked, but the truth remained unchanged. We had not broken up. When I finally reached the parking garage of the apartment we shared, the building felt unfamiliar, smaller somehow, as though I no longer belonged there. Inside, everything seemed tainted. His jacket hung over the back of a chair. His shoes were still by the door. His laptop sat open on the coffee table, as if nothing had shifted at all. I sat down on the couch and stared at the wall. Time passed without measure, minutes, maybe hours. What I did know was that something fundamental had changed at that dinner table. Whatever Daniel had planned, whatever version of events he intended to tell, I was already standing in the aftermath of it. I just did not yet understand how much he had taken or how far he was willing to go. I did not sleep that night. I lay fully dressed on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling while the faint hum of the city filtered through the windows. My phone lit up again and again on the nightstand, calls, messages, his name appearing repeatedly. I ignored all of them. Sometime before dawn, something inside me shifted. It was not calm and it was not peace, it was resolution. By the time sunlight filtered through the blinds, I was no longer searching for answers or replaying what had happened. I had begun making decisions. I moved through the apartment slowly, deliberately, seeing everything with new clarity. The couch I had paid for. The dining table I had bought because Daniel said he worked better with more space. The television mounted on the wall. The subscriptions tied to my email and my card. In the bathroom, his products crowded the counter. In the closet, his clothes took up more room than mine. 2.5 years of shared life suddenly felt like evidence. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop open and a legal pad beside me. I began writing lists, accounts, services, names, numbers. I was not going to argue, beg, or chase explanations. I would not pursue someone who had publicly dismantled me. If Daniel wanted out badly enough to reconstruct reality in front of his family, he could have it, but not at my expense. On Monday morning, I made my first call from the parking lot outside my office before work. I contacted the landlord and explained that I needed to break the lease. He was not pleased, and there was a penalty of $1,200. I agreed immediately. It was worth it. During my lunch break, I called the insurance company and removed Daniel from my car policy. He had been listed as an authorized driver for over a year. The agent confirmed the change, and the monthly rate dropped right away. That evening, I went to the bank and closed the joint checking account we had opened about 6 months earlier so he could contribute more easily. He had deposited maybe $300 in total while I had contributed thousands. When the teller asked if I was certain, I told her I had never been more certain. Back at the apartment, I changed the Wi-Fi password, canceled streaming services, and removed access to the credit card I had given him for emergencies. When I reviewed the statement, my stomach turned. Restaurants, takeout, online purchases, grooming appointments, nearly $2,000 spent while he was preparing to describe me as obsessive. By Tuesday, I had started packing. I boxed up my clothes, books, electronics, and kitchen equipment. I had paid for most of the furniture, the lamps, even the coffee maker. As I worked, I took photos of everything, each room, each item as proof. I left him the couch since it had been purchased secondhand, along with the bed frame. He had actually contributed to that, so I left those behind. Everything else came with me. I found a one-bedroom apartment across town, closer to my office. It was smaller, cleaner, and entirely mine. I signed the lease on Wednesday evening and moved in on Thursday. It took 2 trips with a U-Haul, and the help of a coworker who did not ask questions. Just carried boxes and handed me bottled water when I needed it. Daniel was not there for any of it. He sent a message on Tuesday afternoon saying he would come to get his belongings over the weekend. I responded once, telling him to take what belonged to him and that I was already gone. That was when the calls began. Voicemails, messages, accusations. He insisted that I could not just leave, that the apartment was his as well, that I was overreacting. I answered only one more time, reminding him that his name had never been on the lease and explaining that I had already paid the penalty. I told him the place was his if he wanted to sign a new lease, otherwise he needed to be out by the end of the month. After that, I blocked his number. I blocked his social media. I blocked his email. A clean break. That night, sitting alone in my new apartment with my back against the wall, I felt something unexpected. It was not happiness, not yet, but it was relief. There was space. Space to breathe without being redefined. Space to exist without someone else shaping the narrative of my life. I thought that would be the end. I believed that cutting him off financially and emotionally would close the chapter. I was wrong. The weeks after I moved felt unusually quiet. Not peaceful, just empty. I threw myself into work because it was the only place where things still made sense. Deadlines, emails, blueprints, meetings, everything there remained clear and structured, where words meant exactly what they were supposed to mean. I stayed late most evenings, not out of necessity but because going home meant facing my own thoughts, and I was not ready for that. I avoided the places Daniel and I used to share. The Italian restaurant downtown where we had our first real date. The coffee shop on Trade Street where he would sit for hours pretending to build connections that never turned into anything. I changed my routes, adjusted my routines. Friends noticed. They could see it in the way I flinched when my phone vibrated or how I deflected questions with a tight, controlled smile. When they asked, I simply told them that we had separated and that it had not worked out. Most people accepted that answer without pressing further. A few asked if I was okay, and I told them that I was fine, though I did not know whether that was the truth or just something I was saying until I could figure it out. At night, pieces of that dinner replayed in my mind. Daniel's voice, the look in his mother's eyes, the silence from his father. I began questioning myself, wondering if I had missed something, if there had been a conversation I misunderstood. That is what manipulation does. It forces you to question your own memory, as if you are reviewing evidence in a trial you never agreed to be part of. But whenever doubt started to settle in, I returned to the facts. We had not ended the relationship. There had been no final conversation. He had still been relying on my income while accusing me of obsession. Those facts did not change. 2 weeks passed. The apartment slowly began to feel like mine. I unpacked with intention, keeping things simple. No compromises, no seeking approval, just quiet and order. Then, on a Thursday evening in mid-October, I stopped by the grocery store near my place, the Harris Teeter on East Boulevard. I was standing in the cereal aisle, staring at unfamiliar boxes, when I heard my name. I froze before turning. It was Claire. Daniel's sister stood there with a cart, dressed casually, her hair pulled back, surprise clearly visible on her face. She greeted me softly. I responded politely but cautiously, returning the greeting and asking how she was. She hesitated, glancing down the aisle to make sure no one was nearby, then asked if we could talk outside. Every instinct told me to refuse. Letting anything from Daniel's world back into mine felt dangerous. But curiosity outweighed caution. Maybe I needed confirmation that what had happened had been real. I agreed. We checked out separately and met in the parking lot near her car. She leaned against the driver's door, arms crossed tightly, as if preparing herself for something difficult. She told me she needed to share something important. I responded carefully, explaining that I did not want to reopen everything, that I had already moved on. She shook her head and insisted that there was something I had not heard. My stomach tightened. She told me that Daniel had lied about everything. She explained that there had been no breakup before that dinner, that the accusations and the narrative about me being obsessive had all been fabricated, planned in advance. I felt my pulse quicken as I asked why. She hesitated before answering, then told me there was someone else. The air seemed heavier as she explained that her name was Sophie, that she was his former partner, and that they had been seeing each other for about a month, possibly longer. My hands clenched at my sides. She continued, explaining that he had wanted a clean exit, one that made him appear blameless. He wanted others to believe that I was the problem so that he would not be seen as someone who had taken advantage of me. He wanted sympathy. I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, if that meant he had humiliated me deliberately. She nodded, her eyes filling with emotion, confirming that it had been intentional. A short, sharp laugh escaped me, completely devoid of humor. She went on to describe what had happened after I left that night. Daniel had not been emotional. Instead, he had been controlled, pacing the living room, repeating that he had not intended for things to unfold that way. He claimed he had tried to handle it privately, but that I had forced the situation by refusing to accept the breakup. He kept insisting that he had no other option. I closed my eyes as she continued, explaining that she had confronted him, and that he eventually admitted the truth. He had said he needed to control how the situation looked because I had financial stability, and he did not want anyone to think he had used me. So he reversed the story. In that moment, something inside me settled. I was not imagining things. I was not mistaken. It had all been deliberate. And whatever Daniel thought he had escaped that night at the dinner table, he had not escaped the truth. Not completely. I didn't answer Claire right away. I simply stood there in the parking lot after she finished speaking, surrounded by the distant sounds of shopping carts and car doors closing, as if they belonged to a different world entirely. My body felt heavy, as if gravity itself had suddenly increased. After a moment I nodded, thinking I managed to say thank you, though the words came out automatically, detached from what I was actually feeling. Claire did not try to hug me or reach for me again. She simply gave me a look that made it clear she understood this was not something comfort could fix. Then she got into her car and drove away. I remained in my own car for a long time after that. When I finally returned to my apartment, I locked the door, slipped off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence felt different now, less empty, sharper somehow. Daniel had not simply ended the relationship. He had constructed my humiliation. That dinner had not been an emotional outburst. It had been deliberate. A controlled setting, the right audience, a story placed exactly where it would spread the fastest within his family. He had decided I would be the problem long before I had the chance to speak. I replayed everything with new clarity. The way he had been on his phone during the drive, the faint smiles he tried to hide, the way he walked ahead of me into his parents' house as though he had already distanced himself from me. The separation had not started at dinner. It had begun earlier, the moment he realized he had somewhere else to go. Sophie, his former partner. The irony was not lost on me. He had returned to someone who already knew him. His patterns, his insecurities, his shortcuts. Someone he did not need to impress. Someone who knew him from before responsibility ever became part of the equation. And yet, even then, he had not let go of what I provided until he was certain his version of events would hold. What stayed with me most was not just the betrayal. It was the entitlement. He assumed I would be fine. That because I had stability, a career, financial security, I could absorb everything quietly. That my dignity could bend without breaking. That I would accept the humiliation and disappear. He never considered that cutting him off was not revenge. It was self-respect. I did not confront him after that. Not once. There was nothing left to gain. He had already shown me who he was when he believed he was in control. I refused to give him another opportunity to explain, to twist, or to perform. Silence held more power than anything I could have said. Over the next few weeks, the truth began to surface on its own, without any effort from me. A mutual friend mentioned that Daniel and Sophie were already having problems. He told people he was between places, focusing on himself, claiming he did not need much. What he meant was that he needed someone else to support him. When Sophie realized that support came with expectations, financial, emotional, and otherwise, things began to fall apart. Their relationship did not end with a dramatic argument, but with refusal. After that, he reached out to mutual friends, offering new versions of the story. He claimed I had overreacted, that I had taken things from him, that I had left him without warning. Most people did not believe him. Claire, quietly and without drawing attention, corrected the story where it mattered. His parents eventually learned parts of the truth. I do not know how much, and I do not know what they chose to do with it. Parents often hold on to the version of their children they want to believe, even when it begins to crack. I never asked. In early November, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. It said that a mistake had been made and asked if we could talk. I looked at it for a few seconds, then deleted it and blocked the number. At that point, things had improved. Not perfect, but stable. The apartment felt like mine in a way the previous one never had. I arranged everything exactly as I wanted: clean, intentional, quiet. Work noticed the change before I did. A promotion came through, along with more responsibility and a raise. It felt earned, not conditional. I went on a few dates, nothing serious. One man stood out simply because he was steady and grounded. He paid for his own meal without making it a point, and he did not react when I said I was not in a hurry. That alone felt different. I heard that Daniel had moved back in with his parents in Huntersville. I do not know how long he stayed, and I do not care. Some chapters do not need to be revisited to be closed. I still think about that dinner sometimes, the way the room shifted, how quickly reality can be reshaped when someone else controls the narrative. But walking out without defending myself was the first time I chose myself without hesitation. Cutting him off financially and emotionally was the second. Some people will destroy everything around them just to stay comfortable. I am just grateful I stepped away before the damage reached everything. The strangest part was realizing how little I actually had to do. I did not expose Daniel. I did not send proof or try to correct every lie. I simply stopped participating. And without me there to support his version of events, his story began to fall apart on its own. First, it was subtle. Small inconsistencies people only noticed after hearing different versions of the same story. Dates that did not align, details that shifted, explanations that sounded rehearsed instead of real. Then the questions began. People wondered why he had left the apartment so suddenly if the relationship had ended weeks earlier. They questioned why all the bills had been in my name, why he suddenly needed somewhere to stay. Daniel did not handle those questions well. Without someone to blame, without a clear target to redirect attention toward, he struggled. Sophie had been his backup plan, his reassurance that he had not miscalculated. But she was not like me. She asked questions, kept her finances separate, and noticed patterns. When he complained about being abandoned, she questioned why he had been so comfortable relying on me in the first place. When he began hinting that he needed help for a short time, she asked him for clear details. When he suggested moving in, she refused. The relationship did not collapse in a dramatic way. Instead, it unraveled quietly, one refusal after another until there was nothing left to negotiate. By the time it ended, Daniel had run out of options. He moved back in with his parents in Huntersville, returning to the same house and driveway he had once stormed away from years earlier, insisting he would never come back. I heard about it through a mutual acquaintance. The tone was not gossip, just matter of fact, like describing the weather. The friend mentioned that he was not doing well, and I chose not to ask anything further. Claire and I stayed loosely in touch. We exchanged messages every few weeks, simple check-ins, no revisiting the past, no attempts to unpack everything together. One afternoon, she shared something that stayed with me. She said that he kept repeating that he had never expected me to leave so cleanly, that he had assumed I would argue or try to fix things. I looked at that message for a long time. Of course he had expected that. If I had argued, he could have reshaped the situation again. If I had begged, he could have used that as proof. If I had chased answers, he could have labeled me emotional, unstable, unwilling to let go. Walking away had taken all of that from him. By December, most of the people who mattered understood enough of the truth that they stopped asking questions. Anyone else no longer mattered. Daniel made one last attempt to reinsert himself into the narrative. A mutual friend mentioned that he had been asking about me, wondering how I was doing, saying he hoped there were no hard feelings. When I heard that, I laughed, not with anger, not with bitterness, just with disbelief. There were no hard feelings. There was simply no access. That difference seemed to affect him more than anger ever would have. It became clear to me then that revenge would have been loud, temporary, and visible. What I had done was something else entirely. I had removed myself as a resource, and for someone like Daniel that was far more damaging. By the time winter settled in, the story no longer felt sharp. It still existed in my memory, but it no longer caused pain when I thought about it. My life had shifted into a different rhythm. Quieter, more deliberate. Mornings belonged to me again. I woke up when I wanted, made my coffee the way I preferred, without adjusting to anyone else's schedule or moods. The apartment held silence without pressure or expectation. I began to notice how much of my energy I had been giving away before. Not just financially or physically, but mentally. I had spent years adjusting myself around Daniel's uncertainty, his plans that never became real, his constant needs that were urgent but never resolved. I had mistaken patience for partnership and loyalty for obligation. Without him there, the imbalance became impossible to ignore. Work continued to evolve in ways I had not anticipated. The promotion brought more responsibility, but also more trust. My decisions were no longer second-guessed. Conversations shifted. People listened differently. I realized that I had been leading for a long time. I had just not recognized how much energy I had been using to support someone else at the same time. Dating remained casual. I accepted invitations when I felt like it and declined them when I did not, without explanations or guilt. One evening, after a second date that ended with easy laughter, and a shared understanding that neither of us was rushing anything, I walked home alone and noticed something new. Contentment. Not excitement, not distraction. Just quiet contentment. Daniel gradually faded into the background of my life, in a way I had not expected. I thought there would be more anger, more lingering resentment, but the truth was simpler than that. He no longer mattered. I stopped checking in on shared connections, stopped wondering who knew what, stopped imagining explanations I would never give. The version of me that needed validation from his family no longer existed. One night, while driving home late, a song we used to listen to came on the radio. I waited for the familiar discomfort, but it never came. Instead, I thought about the person I had been at that dinner table, sitting upright, trying to stay reasonable, trying to explain myself to people who had already chosen their perspective. What I felt then was something close to compassion. She did not yet understand that walking away without defending herself would become the turning point. That silence could be strength. That leaving without chaos would be the one thing he would never recover from. I turned the song off and kept driving. That part of my life was over, not because it had been erased but because it no longer defined me. I do not believe closure arrives all at once. It appears quietly in moments you do not announce. The first day you realize you have gone without thinking about them. The moment their name becomes just a name without emotion attached. By early December, I understood something I had not seen before. What happened at that dinner was not simply a breakup gone wrong. It was a test. Daniel was testing how much humiliation I would accept to maintain peace, how much reality I would reshape to protect his image, how much of myself I would sacrifice if he framed everything as misunderstanding instead of betrayal. I failed that test in the best possible way. I walked away. I did not raise my voice. I did not beg. I did not fight for a version of myself someone else had already chosen to discard. That decision carried forward into other parts of my life. At work, I stopped over-explaining. In relationships, I stopped compensating. In my own thoughts, I stopped rewriting my instincts just to sound more reasonable. I trusted myself again. I later heard that Daniel still tells the story from time to time. Not dramatically, but selectively. A softer version now, one where things were mutual, where circumstances were complicated, where no one was really at fault. That is fine. People like him need a version of events they can live with. I do not. The truth does not require defense when your life reflects it. My apartment feels like home in a way no shared space ever did. My schedule belongs to me. My finances are fully my own. My time is spent with people who show up without needing to be carried. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to that dining room, the moment the atmosphere shifted, the moment I realized I was being rewritten in real time. If I could speak to the version of myself who was sitting there, I would not tell her to fight harder. I would tell her something else. You do not win by being believed. You win by walking away whole. Some people will try to take apart your credibility before they allow you to leave with your dignity. Let them keep their version of events. You do not need it. Walking away clean is not weakness, it is clarity. And once you choose it, you cannot return to being the person who believes staying was strength.